Kelly Shann is on a mission of sharing in-depth stories that inspire us to live our best life. She has a YouTube channel, a podcast, and a website where she shares her conversations from all across Australia. She is quick to point out how encouraged she gets listening to other stories of tragedy and resilience. Kelly was gracious with her time and shared with me a little about herself and her journey to inspire others through the lessons we learn from life. Thank you so much for joining us and allowing me to kind of turn the tables around on you and interview you today.
Oh, thank you, Teresa. It's my pleasure, and it's very exciting to be chatting with someone all the way in America.
That's right. Speaking of that, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you are located?
Okay, so we live my husband and 3 children, when they're home, live on a cattle property 3 hours west of Mackay in Queensland, Australia. And we have 17,000 17,000 acres, which equates to about 34,000 hectares. But I think you guys are in acres anyway over there. And we run about 2,500 head of cattle here, or male cattle mainly, and then my husband's parents have another cattle property about 3 hours north of us, and it's 90,000 acres, and that's where all our breeders are.
I imagine you have a lot of animals. Can you tell us a little bit about your animals?
Yeah, so a lot of people use working dogs over here, as they do there, but we don't. So we have 2 very, very spoilt dogs that live inside and don't venture out in the heat too much. And I love birds, and my family very kindly built me an aviary a couple of years ago, and I was so grateful to them, especially because it was so hot. It was just before Christmas, and I thought, it'd only take a couple of days, and it took about 2 weeks. And there was a lot of, as you would say, cussing happening. And anyway, they were very kind, and I'm very grateful. So I have some lovely birds down there, and it's huge. And so we have, over the 2 places, we have about 5,000 head of cattle, and we have a lot of horses. We're very involved with our horses it's called camp drafting. So you don't have camp drafting over there, but it's the fastest growing horse sport in Australia. And then we have 2 bison, which we use for training the horses, because they're really placid, and they're nice to chase around, and very good for training our horses on. So, yeah, and that's about it, and all the wildlife.
I'm assuming, that's a lot of wildlife there. Now, tell me a little bit about Sisters of the North and that organization, and what's your role in the organization?
Oh, so last February, February 2019, there was a monsoon event in northwest Queensland, which is about 12 hours west from where we are. Anyway, there was 7 regions, 7 shires affected. There were 500,000 head of cattle lost, mainly due to exposure, because it rained, I think, non-stop for about 10 days. And that country out there is very flat, so there was a huge inland sea, and it got very cold as well. And Brahman cattle, which are predominantly bred out there, don't handle cold so well. So it was devastating. And, some people lost 90% of their herd. It was a little bit like what happened over there a little bit after I'm just trying to think where that was now. Anyway, so it was funny. It happened, not funny, but it happened to us here, and then a few months later, it happened over there. So you can imagine that so many people lost their livelihoods, and those towns out in that region are small, and they rely on the country people, people from properties coming in and spending money. And so it was a flow-on effect of the devastation, apart from the horrific, what they witnessed and how horrific that was, but also the financial impact that was going to have in years to come. So we have a lot of friends out there, and we were actually down at a place called Tamworth in New South Wales. They have a huge horse sale, which we sell horses at every February, and it goes for a week. It's a week-long event. So, we were down there, and there were some of our friends from out west were there as well, and it was terrible because this was all playing out and they couldn't get home, and they were hearing all these stories of thousands and thousands of head of cattle. And it wasn't just the cattle, it was the wildlife as well. So everything was just decimated. So a friend of mine came to me on the Friday afternoon and said, Kelly, will you help me? We need to, get together and do something. So we went to the people who ran the sale, and we were hopeful that the vendors and buyers might be able to donate a portion of their funds. Anyway, that was just going to be a nightmare. So another friend of ours who we had the meeting with on the Saturday morning said, why don't we set up a GoFundMe page? So that was kind of where it all started. Sisters of the North had existed as a mental health initiative. They were going to run a camp draft out in Cloncurry in the April. So the name was already there, and it was just a little camp draft organisation. So we named it Sisters of the North, named the GoFundMe page Sisters of the North, not having any plan. Like, honestly, Teresa, don't think you're going to just raise a few dollars and not give it any thought, because holy heck, 2 years later, and we raised over $1.2 million. And,
wow.
And it was just, for me, it was emotional seeing that generosity. That's probably what made me more emotional than anything. So anyway, we had a small team together. We were very fortunate that one of our friends worked for the Primary Health Network, which is government-based initiative, and they just said to Susan at the beginning, we will pay you to run Sisters of the North. So that was just such a blessing, because we wouldn't have handled it otherwise, because it was so huge. And we were fortunate that our Prime Minister had been out there and saw the devastation and the horror. So they fast-tracked our deductible gift registration through, which means that every cent then became tax deductible. So we had a lot of help along the way. Another friend of ours who is really great with technology set up this amazing platform called Live Voucher, because our main goal was to make sure that all the money stayed within those communities. So, for example, if you lived in the Julia Creek district, the money that you were given could only be spent within the businesses in Julia Creek. So we just made sure that those economies kept going. So, we had teething problems. We had a bit of flack at times. But, we were starting from nothing, with nothing, and with no knowledge. So I'm really proud of what we all achieved, and, we're winding it down now. We've got most of the funds out. We also supported a lot of community events and that were based sort of around mental health awareness and looking after those people that were affected. So, yeah, I would never, ever have thought, it certainly wasn't planned. It was a day-by-day thing. So anyway, yeah, it worked out very, very well. That's the greatest thing, I think, about any tragedy, is it brings people together. And as awful as the happening is, the residual effect and flow-on effect just shows, I think, what the human spirit really is.
Right. Which kind of brings us all about to your I'm not sure that your channel started by sharing these stories, but it really does seem to tie in really well with that, what you're doing on Life Journeys TV. Can you talk a little bit about how you started that?
Yeah, so I actually had started it before, but like anything, everything I do, I jumped in boots and all with no real plan, but thought, oh, this is what I'm going to do, and I'll see how it goes. So, and it really came from me being a little bit down, a bit depressed, and I was driving home from Mackay. I'd been down in Brisbane, driving home from Mackay one day, where I'd flown into, and I was listening to a podcast, and I thought, people's experiences can make you feel so much better hearing. They can be very, very uplifting. Anyway, I thought, I could do something like that. So I just started thinking, and I honestly believe when you start thinking about things, the answers come, they're put in front of you. And so all of a sudden I was thinking about all these people I could interview, and I started practicing on my friends, which I had every intention of putting them up, that they were so terrible. I couldn't, but I'll go back and interview them because they do have really interesting stories. But, the first one I did, my beautiful husband, Barry, videoed it, and I didn't even have a tripod, and he was way away, and it's moving because he's just holding the phone, and it was so funny. Anyway, so yeah, I'd had the interviews in place, but hadn't even had them edited or anything. And then this happened in the February, and I just thought, well, the fellow that Teresa, the fellow that initiated the live voucher program, he was great, on the computer and with all sorts of technology. So I just happened to say to Clay one day, this is what I've done. I've got these videos there. Would you help me launch a platform and put it all together? He said, that's a great idea. Why don't you and I go out and we'll film, some stories of what's happened out there? I said, okay. So we flew into Mount Isa and drove out to Cloncurry and Julia Creek and Winton and put some stories together. So that, and, that has been really great in looking back. It's documented how people were feeling, what happened, and so that all really just fell into place. We were so lucky, to have, because otherwise, we wouldn't have had that as much of the information documented and the stories told. So yeah, that's kind of how it all came about, and then it's gone from there. And whilst, I'm not doing so many stories out there now, there's still lots of stories to be had and told. And, I'm trying to mix it up a bit with.
Speak a little bit about that, how your desire to just inspire and help people.
Yeah. So I guess in a way it honestly comes from a place of selfishness from my part, because I just know that there's so much to be had personally from hearing people's stories who've been through really tough times, and and their courage in speaking out. And honestly, every single interview, every single person I've spoken to, I have taken a huge thing, something huge away from their interviews. So, and it's made me more mindful. I think it's making me a better person. So from that perspective, it's quite selfish, but to be able to put that out there and hope that there's other people being helped. And, one of the greatest things is when people that I love is when people message me and tell me what an impact it's had on their lives. And that's what it's all about for me. I just, life's not always easy, you got to find some humour in life, and no matter on the darkest day, you know, there's always something funny that you'll find if you look for it.
When you were interviewing Oprah Winfrey's former chief of staff, and you were like, before you tell this story, before you teach us what you're here to teach us, tell us this story. And I loved that because it was like, yes, in everything there's a teachable moment. And every interview, it seems like you have definitely a purpose for each person and each story that you're sharing.
And thank you. No, they set all of my or everyone I've spoken to has something, you know, they've had a huge impact on me, and I know I'm living a better life and a happier life and learning so much. I mean, it's a work in progress, and yeah, as we all are.
Yeah. You also said in that blog post that you struggled a little bit with self-doubt. Do you still struggle with that? And if you do, what do you do about it?
Yeah, I think I'm better now. I had an interview yesterday, and Amy said, my daughter said to me, "Are you nervous?" Because she was quite a well-known lady. And I said, "No, actually I'm not." And then that was about an hour before, and then I started thinking, oh, maybe I should be nervous. Maybe I'm taking this too lightly. But so I am more relaxed now, the more I've done it. But yeah, when I first started, because, you know, I'm not a journalist, I know I used to a very, very long time ago, like 33 years ago, do a lot of public speaking.
Now, that would be in 1987. You were Mrs. Queensland. Is that correct?
Miss Queensland, yeah. So, and I was just, it's probably a little bit like, well, it was a fundraising initiative of the Cerebral Palsy League. So we raised money for people and created awareness for people afflicted with cerebral palsy. So, and I was the state title holder. So I guess in a way it's a little bit like, you know, your Miss Texas, although it's not so much of a beauty contest, it's more of a fundraising initiative. But it doesn't exist anymore, which is such a shame because, you know, it did a lot of good for so many people. And I actually have a really amazing story, which remind me about Raylene if I forget, because I probably will. I'll tell you the story about Raylene. But, yeah, so, yes, I was just this young girl from Mara in central Queensland from a property, and it all just kind of fell into place. I met this man whose wife was a recruitment officer for the Miss Australia Quest, and so yeah. And anyway, I raised a lot of money, and I went to my regional final thinking that, you know, I would have a real chance at being the fundraiser and going to state final for the fundraising. And anyway, when I was the second highest fundraiser, and when they announced it, I thought, it was a little bit of a letdown because you put your whole heart and soul into something, and you know, it's your life for a year, and all of a sudden it's over like that. Anyway, so all I wanted to do was just get off the stage because, you know, they had us all up on the stage, and then they announced the regional title holder, and it was me, and I just couldn't believe it because I couldn't even speak properly. And anyway, so I went to state final, and all the other girls were overwhelmed with it, and I should have been, but I think they were so nervous and they felt like they had so much pressure on them. But I just knew I didn't have a chance in hell of winning. So I was just going to enjoy myself. And so even going, I remember the poor girl that went in before me, and she walked, because there was a panel of judges, you know, and they sat you down and asked you all these questions individually, like you were in this little room. And anyway, this girl that went before me, she came out and she was white, and she just said, "Oh, that was horrific." So I just got, anyway, so I just went in, and they actually made you stand there, so you couldn't even sit down. What? And so you had to stand in front of this group of 5 people and they were asking you all these questions. So anyway, the night of the announcement, it was just, I just couldn't believe that it was me that won. And I had the most wonderful year, and it changed my life in so many ways. And I surprised myself so many times that I could actually do this. And I had no confidence up until then. So it really, really did help me. And I hope I had an impact on the people that it was all about anyway. And which brings me to my story about Raylene. So it was called the Spastic Centre back then, so that's no longer allowed, for obvious reasons. But so and everything's changed. Of course, that was 33 years ago. But the Queensland Spastic Welfare League operated it was like a boarding school for kids who lived away from Brisbane, and they would come and they would live in this boarding facility and go to school every day and do things. And anyway, there was this one, and they were little, like there were kids there that were, once they started school age, they would come and live at in New Farm at the league. And there was this wonderful, wonderful man there whose name was Harvey. And Harvey just lived for these kids. Like he was their mentor, their father figure, and nothing was too much trouble. Anyway, I used to go, every time I went to Brisbane, I would make sure I went, and I befriended this little girl called Raylene, and Raylene couldn't speak or anything. And she came from, I think she was about 4 hours west of Brisbane. So she, didn't see her family very often. Or anyway, over the years, of course, I lost touch with Raylene over the years. And over the years, I've always thought of her, and I've even named a potty calf after her. And I've always talked about her to the kids and everything. She just, I don't know, she just had a real, I just felt really connected to Raylene. Anyway, one day I was driving my daughter, my youngest daughter, we were going back to Brisbane, which is a 13-hour drive from home, to put her back into school. And we drove through, which normally I wouldn't go that way, but we drove through the region where Raylene lived. Anyway, I said to Lily, you know how I always talk about Raylene? Well, this is where she lived. And I said, I just can't, I've got a mental blank of what her surname is. And then I remembered, and I said, Darlington, it was Raylene Darlington. And then I said to Lily, I wish I knew where her parents lived, because I'd go and knock on the door and say, can you put me in touch with Raylene? Anyway, then we drove past Darlington Road. So it's just this little, farming community. Anyway, we got to Brisbane, and I said to Lily, I am going to look up on Facebook and try and find Raylene. So I found her on Facebook. So I sent her a message. Anyway, I didn't hear back from her. And it was probably 2 months. Oh, sorry, no, it wasn't. It was. So that was at the end of January. It was March before I heard back from her. And every year, 4 of my friends and myself go on a girls' trip. We have a few days away, and they're all neighbours, like we all had our children all went through distance education together. And so it's just our little thing, and we have lots of laughs, and it's so much fun. And anyway, this particular year we weren't going anywhere too exotic. We were just going to Bundaberg, and because one of our friends grew up there and she wanted to take us there and show us. So we went off to Bundaberg, and lo and behold, about a month before that, I've received a message from Raylene. She got back to me, and turned out she lived in Bundaberg. And I rang Lily. I said, Lily, guess what? Raylene, guess where she lives? And she couldn't guess. And so I said, Bundaberg. And guess, where we're going for our girls' trip? Bundaberg. So, I didn't hear back from her again. I told her that we were going to Bundaberg. Didn't hear back. We get to Bundaberg the day before we left, And I remember we were getting out of the car because Jenny, my friend's mum, was in hospital. So we were going up to the hospital to see her mum. We got out of the car. My phone tinged. Raylene messaged me, when are you in Bundaberg? I said, Raylene, I'm here. So I packed up the next morning and went and saw her. And so it's just how, like, if she'd messaged me a day later, she would have missed me. And so I was so pleased to see her. And it was funny, you know, so many years had passed. And when I knew her, she was this little girl, and now she's an adult. And anyway, so, yeah, that's my Raylene story.
Isn't that cute? That's so fun, too. Do you think that that influenced your interview style when you were doing all the public speaking? Do you think that that helped you be prepared for interviews?
It certainly helped me I knew I'd be rough at the start, but I knew I'd eventually be able to draw on what I had experienced. And yeah, I don't know. I didn't really like everything. I just trust that it'll come. And so, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's influenced my interviewing style, because I haven't honestly given any thought to an interview style, except just to be authentic and be myself and you know, make sure I do my research and know about the person that I'm interviewing. Yeah.
Right. But what I've noticed, I had a couple of questions about interview style, and one of them is, I want to ask you this because I believe that animals have a healing nature about them. I really do. And I've noticed that in your videos, in your interviews, it's very transparent that the guest is very safe with you. And I'm wondering if that is that something you do intentional, or something you have developed because of your work with animals, or am I crazy?
I don't think you're crazy, but I thank you. I'm very flattered that you would say that. I'm very, very flattered, because you know, you never see yourself as other people see you. So so I didn't even know that I was doing that. So.
Now you deal with a lot of some serious topics, some suicide attempts, to bullying, to men's issues, mental health, women's issues. I mean, you've even autism, someone living with an autistic child. I'm wondering, are you purposely looking for those kind of topics, or how do you find your interviewees?
You know what I said before about when you make your mind up and things just come to you, and you start thinking along those lines. So I think that's what it is. They honestly find me in a way, and I guess, you know, a lot of them are you know, there's a lot of friends of mine. There's people that I've met in the past. There's people. Anthony Hart, for example, got in touch through Sisters of the North, and he had took an attempt on his life, and he's an amazing man, you know, and we've become really quite friendly, you know. But yeah, they're just, and sometimes people will say, oh, you know, you need to talk to this person, and so yeah, and I just guess I'm aware. More aware now than if I was just sitting on my couch, like, and flicking through Facebook or whatever. I think subconsciously I'm on the lookout for stories. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So for just a fun question, who would be your like dream famous person interview?
Oh my gosh. Probably Oprah, because I think I mentioned to Libby, I'm not sure if I mentioned it in her interview or when we were just talking, but I honestly believe Oprah has been the driving force behind how we think, the direction that we're going with our mindfulness and our spirit. And she has such a huge impact on people, and it comes from the people that she interviews who have those beliefs. And so she is the greatest conductor, I suppose, of getting that message out into the world, because we didn't think like this even 20 or 30 years ago, I suppose. It's all about the mindfulness. And
well, I have very much enjoyed getting to know you a little bit today and getting to talk to you, interview you. I'm so thank you you've been so gracious with your time to let me do this.
Oh, Teresa, I've really enjoyed it. And I must say, I haven't watched all of your videos yet either, but I really love them. And I love the little personal blogs that you do as well. And you're very clever, and you're very, very lucky to have that wonderful cameraman.
Yes, he's hiding over here, but yes, I am. Thanks again for doing this.
No, thank you, Teresa.